Wow, Christmas week. I love this week. My favorite week in all of the year. Merry Christmas to all of you. Be careful, be safe, and make sure all those around you are taking care of all their safety mandates. Today, by popular demand, I mean popular demand, I've done thousands of stories, but never have I had the reaction of the story we did with beautiful Mary Henson the other day, the wife of the late and great Lou Henson. We don't want to waste any time. What a great feeling I had doing this interview, and what a great feeling I have to reintroduce Mary Henson. Let's go to that story right now. Coach passed away. He's in heaven watching this show today with angels next to him doing backflips, so happy that this show is on the air across the world today. We start this show with Mrs. Henson, Mrs. Mary Henson, because she's going to reflect back on the life of her husband, life with her husband, Lou. And to help me with the interview today is going to be a former Aggie great, a former Aggie player. He is a great former Aggie, let's put it that way. And he played for that great Final Four team, guided by Lou Henson, when they got third in the country, the NCAA Final Four. What a story that is. There are so many stories in our presentation today. And I'm sitting here trying to keep it all together, and I'm so honored to bring on Mrs. Lou Henson first. Mary Henson, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Henry. I'm so honored, and it's such a pleasure to be on with you. You were always one of our favorites, you know, so we're thrilled to be on with you and to see your face and to see Chito's shining face over there. Oh, it's great to me. It's great.
Well,
it's
now that you've introduced him, now that you've introduced Chito, let's bring his picture up. Chito, good morning to you, live from Los Angeles. How are you, former Aggie star?
Good morning, beautiful people. How are you guys? It's a pleasure. Look at this. You guys look pretty sharp yourself there, Henry, and Mrs. Henson, beautiful as usual. Good morning to you guys.
Thanks, Chito.
Mrs. Henson, if I can call you that out of respect.
No, I want to call you
Mary.
Mary, please.
Okay,
please.
all right. I did that out of respect now. So
I know, but just call me Mary.
Mary, let's start at the beginning. Where are you from?
Henry, it's such a long story on how we met, but I'll have to tell you a little bit about it, just a little bit about how Lou and I met. You know, Lou actually was a migrant worker, and that is true. He lived in Oklahoma. There was no work for them in Oklahoma in the 50s, in the early 50s, no work. So he and some of his college buddies decided they had to go find some work because they had to have some money. So they headed north during the summer. They were all in college, but during the summer, they just headed north and stopped at my little hometown of Lanark, Lanark, Illinois. It's in northwestern Illinois, because it had a Green Giant canning factory there. And so he came there three different summer, excuse me, I'm gonna have to get a little water, 3 different summers. And I met him the last month of the last summer he would have ever been in Lanark, Illinois. He tells everybody, I almost escaped. And that's the truth. He almost did.
What a story.
But that's how that started. That's how we met.
Well, did he flirt with you? Did he ask you out on a date to dinner?
Listen, he was one smart guy. He was head man in the brine room, you know, where they mix the salt and sugar. But guess what? He says, okay, I was the head man. Well, there was only one guy in there. He was it. And so he had a window in that brine room that faced the ladies' room. So he had a view of every woman that came past to go to the restroom. He had a view of that person. And then after they had a little area there where we could get Cokes and things. And so we'd sit there on the bench, have our little break, 15-minute break or so. So if he saw somebody interesting out there, hey, he'd just go out and get a Coke and sit down, and you know how that goes. So that's how that worked out. Yes, he did come out with a Coke and sat down.
When you saw Coach Henson the first time, was it love at first sight, or did he grow on you?
Henry, I didn't know all this was going to be so personal.
Yeah, whoop.
Well, to tell you the truth, Henry, we dated for 35 straight days. Now, it wasn't night all the time. Sometimes during the day, if it rained, he could go and we could go to my home or someplace like that and have a picnic if it was a nice day. And we saw each other every day for 35 straight days. And at the end of that time, he asked me to marry him. And of course, I was crazy about him. And I said, sure, let's do it. Well, we didn't get married until the last of December, but he was still playing at New Mexico. He was still an Aggie. And Aggies weren't supposed to get married while they were playing ball, were they, Chito? That was probably an unwritten rule.
Oh.
Well, anyway, we went ahead and I worked in Rockford, Illinois, and he went back to New Mexico State and finished his season. And then finished the semester. And then he drove through a blizzard to come pick me up in Northern Illinois again. And we got engaged on December 20th. And we went to Oklahoma to meet his parents. And my parents, of course, they couldn't believe that we were doing this, but it was, I was the second to the last of 10 children. And by then they had sort of given up. I think my parents were tired by then. So they just let us do sort of what we wanted to. But we went to Oklahoma and met his parents and spent Christmas with them. And we thought we were going to get married right there in Wagner, Oklahoma. Wrong. They had a 3-day waiting period. And guess what? Lou had to be back to practice on December 29th. So we could not stay there. We had to drive. We got in the car and we drove to Las Cruces. We walked into the courthouse. We said we want to get married, but we don't want it publicized. We don't want anything in the paper. And those dear people were so kind. They said, oh, we won't put it in the paper, because they knew Lou was a player. And so we got married, and I left and went to California immediately. And Lou finished his senior year of basketball. Well, he came and got me after the season, brought me back to Las Cruces. He had rented a little apartment. He'd made all of his team members come in and help paint it because it needed a painting badly. And that's when we started our married life together. And they said it wouldn't last. 65 and a half years later, we were still married.
Wow.
So that's my story.
What a story. We had to bring that up. That is a golden story from Mary Henson, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. Chito Reyes, we bring you in now because you knew Mary Henson and Coach Henson as a couple. Your first impressions of Mary and the two of them as a happily married couple. What do you remember the first time you saw or met them together?
Yeah, beautiful couple. You're right. During my senior season at John Marshall High School in LA, that was back then. Coach Henson started recruiting me, and he would call me every morning around 6 o'clock. There's an hour difference over there, and I had to get up and tell him what happened the night before their games. Well, we scheduled a recruiting trip to go to Las Cruces and check out New Mexico State. I had quite a few other offers because I used to study, so my grades qualified for wherever if I applied somewhere. But New Mexico State, my grandmother was in the area and relatives and all that. Well, anyway, we went down, and Coach Henson said, well, if we're not going to fly you in, my family was going to go down to visit my grandmother anyway during that summer. So we drove down there, and I remember we got to my grandmother's house, and then Coach Henson said, well, come over for dinner tomorrow. Bring your mom and your dad, and we'll visit. This is my recruiting trip. Well, I remember my dad and my mom, they had no clue as to where we were going. And so they gave us directions, and we go to Las Cruces. And I remember they told us, you can't miss our house, because when you get up on this Telshore area, you're going to see a house with white rock and a big old brown circle in the shape of a basketball. So that is, to this day, my mom remembers that house, because how could you get lost in a beautiful house out there, and the only house with white rock in front and a big giant brown circle shape of a basketball. So we go in there, and I met Mrs. Henson and Coach Henson. And to me, it was like joining a family immediately. They treated my mom and my dad as if they've known them for so long. And I remember I would sit there, and here I am supposed to be on a recruiting trip, but Coach and Mrs. Henson treated us as if we're just the family members coming to eat dinner. And that stuck with me. And since that day one, it was always like that, Henry. Always, they cared for us, and I felt wanted. I felt like they cared what was going to happen to me. And, from day one to this day, I can honestly say that's the image that I have of both of them, that they cared for me, my mom, and my dad, and my family. And that's the whole thing that I always remember about them. They're so caring, and they always made me feel that way. Never forgot that.
Mary, first thing we better do, on behalf of thousands around the world, especially in Illinois, especially in New Mexico, we give you, Mary, our sincere condolences that Coach passed away recently. But if there was ever a man destined for heaven, in our opinion, it's Lou Henson. I prefaced to you earlier, I looked at him as a leader, a man of humility. I looked at him as a saint. When you observed Coach Henson, the way you got to know him, if it's not too private, what were your thoughts and what are your descriptions of your husband?
Well, I can best describe Lou by telling this story. I told you we met at the canning factory. He and his two brothers and another one or two college buddies were there. He was making $1 an hour. That was big bucks back then. Big bucks. but he was working a 24-hour shift. And the reason he could do that was because, you know, when you make the brine for the canning, for the corn and peas, it would be in a big vat, and it would take a while for the vat to run down. And so he could sleep on the sacks of salt and sugar. He could sleep right there on the job while it ran down, and then he'd get up and redo it. And here's the real kicker, though. He was sending home to his parents. I mean, here he is, a senior in college. He was sending home to his parents over half of his dollar that he made. That was his goal, to make money for the family. And that told me a huge amount about character and what he was made of. And believe me, that was what he was made of. He wasn't really a saint, Henry. I'd actually like to have some of that money that the dollar he took. Christmas is coming. I'd like to have some of that money he could have made. He didn't consult with me about that, about the dollar, but that's okay. That's another story. But anyway, I can tell you, and I had 17 years to get used to the idea of his not being here, because 17 years ago, he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And we didn't know if he'd be here 2 months or a month or how long he'd be here. But he went and got really great treatment and experimental trial, and they whipped the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, put that into remission. But then, of course, he got the viral encephalitis, and that did him in eventually. He would have coached in a wheelchair. Oh, he wanted to, but it wasn't meant to be. It wasn't meant to be. So, but anyway, he had such heart, such fighting spirit. Oh my gosh. And Chito, I know you saw that in him when he was involved in coaching a game, didn't you? I mean,
one of the things about him that I'll always remember is the fact that he would never lead you astray. He would never sugarcoat anything for you. He would tell you, look, you need to be over here, or if you'd hustled a little bit more. We used to watch film, and oh my God, if he had that remote to run that film back and forth, if they ran past you, oh my God, all the guys would be looking at you, laughing at you, because look at that guy. He ran right by Chito. Look at him. He's going around. If Chito would have worked harder, he could have been right up in front and stopped that guy. But no, he didn't. So, oh my goodness, if you had to do that, if you messed up, you're going to hear about it. But I'll tell you one thing about him, about Coach, is that, like I said, he never sugarcoated anything for you. His character always stood out. And I tell you one thing, there could have been 20,000 people in the stands, or 18,000 up in Albuquerque, the snake pit. And those people were yelling at you, hounding you and just getting on you. And if you did something, I don't care how many people were, the only voice you heard was Coach's voice. That's how much we were trained to listen to him and to do what he was asking of us. Otherwise, you'd be right next to him on the bench.
Right. You've got that right, Chito.
Mary, what did you observe about the coaching talents of your husband?
Oh my gosh, that started early on. He started at the high school level there in Las Cruces High School, and he was the B team coach. For 2 years, he was the B team basketball coach. Well, he got those little kids they were little kids at the time, those B team kids. And he didn't care how young they were or how big they were. He was going to teach them the fundamentals of basketball. He was going to teach them how to shoot, how to dribble, how to do everything properly. And then they would go out there and try to do it. Okay, so that little team, they just, well, I have the picture of that little team holding the first little trophy that he and the team ever won in his career. I have a picture of that. And that was as much fun as any Big Ten game or any Aggie game we've ever had. It was so fun for him to coach those kids. And each level, he wanted them to learn the game. And I'm sure, Chito, that you will agree with that, that he taught every last detail of the game.
Sure. You know, I didn't mean to interrupt it. One thing that I always mention is that I was blessed that I was able, after New Mexico State, I was able to travel with the Mexican Olympic team, the national team. And we traveled to various countries in the world. And one thing that I always remember is that I always felt that I was prepared. Whether I wasn't better than anybody else or whatever, but I was going to work harder. But I thought I was always going to be mentally, physically, and emotionally ready for whatever challenge I was coming to. And, you know, and that's what Coach instilled in us, to always be ready, be prepared. Otherwise, you had no business being on the court. I never forgot that.
That's
What a compliment.
A good thing to remember in life, too, isn't it?
Yes.
Mary, his stay at New Mexico State, the both of you, being responsible for moving the team from Las Cruces High School to the big, famous, luxurious Pan American Center, the development of the progress of his teams forced the community to build a big facility. You were in those meetings. You knew what happened in that town. Can you condense that story for us, how basketball in Las Cruces grew to be the biggest show in that community?
Well, let's face it, the Las Cruces community, they were looking, and the whole area, they were looking for something to grasp to a winner of some sort. And that's when Lou, it's why he came back to New Mexico State from Hardin-Simmons, because he felt like he could help his alma mater. And so we were playing in the Las Cruces High School gym, where he actually had coached basketball at the high school level. We were playing there 2 years because the gym, Williams Gym on campus, it only held about 2,000 people, didn't it, Chito? Maybe about, maybe not even that. And Las Cruces High held about 5,000. So we had to just go but when we started winning, that Miracle Midget team got everybody revved up. That team was so short, and I mean, our tallest guy was Wes Moorhead, 6'6", and he was our center. And when they started winning, oh my gosh, people couldn't believe it. And then when we knocked off UTEP and the Lobos that same year, oh wow, everybody went crazy. And from then on, and of course, you know, Lou kept turning out winners, and it was Katie bar the door. You just had all that enthusiasm and support, and you know, everybody was gung-ho about the whole basketball program?
Well, it grew and grew, and the rivalry with the Lobos and the Aggies was sensational. As a sports fan, as a New Mexican, it was the game of the year, and they played two. It was so entertaining. You know, we always talk, oh, I hate those Aggies. Oh, I hate those Lobos. But we couldn't live without the rivalry. You know, they got to rethink it, rephrase it, and say, boy, I love it when they play. And being a broadcaster and being a fan too, I could not get enough of that great rivalry with Coach King versus Coach Henson, the Aggies against the Lobos. You know what I'm talking about. Take the story from there and the significance.
Oh my goodness. That rivalry was something else, especially when Lou had come in, and you know, he was an alum, and the Aggies were so thrilled to have him back. And when we started winning and upset, you know, those two teams, I think the Lobos were ranked number 3 that year when we knocked them off at Las Cruces High Gym. And the UTEP had just won the national championship the year before and had practically everybody back. I think there was just 1 or 2 that didn't come back on that team. And so that's really the whole valley from UTEP clear up to Albuquerque. Oh my gosh, they jumped on board, and they were absolutely just enthralled with that whole scene. And hey, tickets were really tough to come by after that. And Lou said that first year that we had to, you know, he met with the administrators and told them we had to get an arena. We just had to do it. And of course, with all the support and enthusiasm going on, the administrators felt like it might be a good time to do just that. And they went ahead and started drawing up plans.
Wow.
And the architect for that whole thing was a young man from Roswell, but he had graduated from the University of Illinois. and he and Lou hit it off really well. They worked together very, very well. His name was Rem Alley, and he was a wonderful architect. And they put that arena together for, I mean, it was just an unbelievably small amount of money. You could never get anything equivalent for less than what, 50 million. I don't know what it would cost now. But at that time, I think it was 3 million or less. They put that arena together. Yeah.
That's unheard of today.
It is. It totally is.
When you saw your husband in the midst of the fire, the real coaching, the drama, what did you see in your husband, and how much of that did he take home after the game? But what was he all about as a competitor?
Competition is his middle name, because he competes at anything you can get. Anytime he can get somebody to compete with him, he will compete. Checkers, bridge, dominoes, all those games. Oh my gosh, he'll butter you up and love you up, and then he'll want to crush you at a game. He was so competitive, but I think he had to get that way because he had let's see, five brothers that he grew up with, and that probably made him a little competitive. But he would never back down to anything. He just, if it if it was right, if it was the right thing to do, he would never back down to any, even to those referees. Of course, it got him thrown out of a game a time or two, but what,
Chito, you were with him in those dramatic games. You're sitting on the bench. He had your undivided attention, Chito. He was talking words that would enhance the effort of your team, strategy that would outsmart the other team. In those dramatic moments on the bench, listening in the starting five, attentive to every word that Coach Henson spoke, what do you remember, Chito Reyes?
What I do remember is the fact that he always seemed to be he always had an idea of what's going to be my next step. If something didn't work, he was ready to put something else in. So he was never lost for a word or an idea, well, we're going to do this. But he was always aware if the other team is coming down and you're not rebounding, well, hey, let's address the rebounding thing. He always had a plan to counteract whatever they were throwing at you. And like I said before, it doesn't matter how many people were in the stands, Henry. You always heard him. You always heard him. I don't care what it was, whether he was yelling at Sam or Charlie or whatever. You heard that too. Oh, but especially if he's yelling at you, oh my goodness. And if the buzzer sounded, I knew I'm going back to the bench if I messed up, But it's just the way that we were so used to, so trained to listen to his plan. And he didn't have to say things to us. We knew we messed up. And without even saying it, we heard that buzzer. Oh, I know, I turned around. Oh, I know somebody's coming in for me. But that's how much ahead of the game he was. He always had a plan. And he believed me, like Mrs. Henson said, he wasn't going to let you beat him. If he could, he was just so competitive. And that's what I always remember, that he had his mindset. And not only that, but making you better. It wasn't about making you better. Because as a competitor, you want to do your best, and he wanted you to improve and make you a better ball player, and in turn makes the team a better team for that.
Chito, in layman's terms, and just being an athlete, observing your coach, how good a coach was Lou Henson?
None better. Like I said before, I was fortunate. I played for a lot of coaches, and it was always like there was no comparison. But the thing is what the other coaches lacked, I always carried what Coach had instilled in me to go on and compensate for what the others weren't doing. What Coach taught me, I knew that it was probably the right way to do it. I knew that if the ball goes up, you don't look at the ball, you look for your man and block him out. If the man is coming around, you go over there and help on this side. Without anybody telling you, you already have that idea. If the ball is shot from one end of the court, from one side of the court, the ball's going to go to the other side of the court. So you run over there to the other side. He always prepared you for that. He said, look, if somebody shoots from the right tee, the odds are the ball's going to bounce over to the left. So you knew you had all the stuff he trained in you. And he was like the best. Like I said, he prepared me in so many ways. And like I said, you feel confident. And, that's why I'll always owe that he molded me not only as a ball player, but as a competitor, as a person, and because you carry that off the court too and in life.
Mary, I want to get to the Final Four team as quickly as I can. But let me go off the words of Chito. And let me ask you those fundamental words. How good a coach was your husband, Lou Henson?
Well, I saw him start with that little B team, and I saw him go right on to the highest level. And I can tell you, there was no one in America who prepared his team any better than Lou Henson. And he knew the game. Oh my gosh, he knew the game backward and forward. And I'm glad that Chito brought up preparation, because Lou was so prepared for anything that came their way. He was prepared for it. And he would teach the team and instill that in them. If this happens, go do this. If that happens, go the other. You know, he just had an uncanny ability to teach. He was such a teacher, and he was a math teacher at the high school, so he was into numbers and detail. Hey, he would talk about preparation. He would have some manager in every practice chart everything. I'm talking Chito. Didn't you have to stand there and listen in even a game in practice? All those stats that they'd read off, and if you'd gotten one rebound, that would be a biggie, or you know, go over all those stats.
He had this thing about rebounding and drawing charging fouls. Well, we had Sam at 6'10", 6'11", and we had Charlie at 5'8". So they always dominated both categories, and he was always praising them. I said, hey, well, we can't do that. But he stressed that. It was very important to him.
Oh, yes.
Mary, the Final Four team, Sam Lacey, Jimmy Collins, Chito Reyes, Charlie, Chris, and the rest. What are your memories about that team in particular?
Well, he brought together players that could play. They were all wonderful athletes and wonderful basketball players. And Jimmy in particular, I've got to talk about Jimmy because of his passing this weekend. And I'm sure you were going to bring that up later, but since we're starting with the Final Four team, you have to start with Jimmy Collins. Jimmy came to us to Las Cruces, New Mexico from Syracuse, New York. Lou had never seen him play. We took the word of Ed Murphy, was Lou's, he played for us at Hardin Simmons, and he was our assistant. His father, he was from Syracuse. His father was a policeman in Syracuse who loved to follow high school ball. So he'd go to all these games, and he'd tell Ed about any talent that he saw that we should check out. So on Jimmy Collins, he had seen him play, and he'd said, oh, this kid is a player. You should look at him. Well, I don't know how Jimmy got overlooked so much, but Ed recruited Jimmy, and Jimmy decided to come to New Mexico State. We were just really sort of shocked. But he got on a bus in Syracuse, rode 4 days to Las Cruces, New Mexico. He got off that, and this is Jimmy telling this story. Jimmy got off, he said there was this young guy standing there, and he had a sort of an Oklahoma drawl, and he said, and he reached out his hand and he shook hands, and that handshake solidified a relationship that started at that moment and through 50 years, and we lost Jimmy this last weekend. 50 years of he's like a son to us. As many of our players, well, we consider them sons, but some you're a little closer to than others. But Jimmy was the one who was one of them that we got close to, because he not only played for us, he assisted Lou at Illinois for years. And so we got close to him, his family. We saw them all grow up. You know, you get very close to people. And it's really like losing Lou all over again almost. feels like that.
Wow.
But Lou opened his arms and greeted Jimmy, I can tell you. When Jimmy got to heaven, Lou was right there. Come on in. You're going to make this team I've got organized up here. So Jimmy's up there playing guard again, I'm sure.
That team had something special, obviously. You watched them progress. I mean, the Lobos were great. UTEP was great that year. And, well, they were prepared for this venture to the Final Four. But you only know how prepared. What was that week like, Mary, to watch the Aggies that week in the Final Four?
Well, to tell you the truth, I was sick a lot of that week because I had the flu. Can you believe it? I didn't even get to go to our first game at College Park, Maryland. That's where we played the Final Four that year. Chito remembers all that. I didn't even get to go to that Final Four. I was so sick. But it was, of course, I've seen it since. You know, I've seen all the games on film. Lou is very big on films, as Chito knows, and he could have his team study those films. So I'm sure they went over the first game. We probably had the film of that game that night, maybe, and they might have gone over it. But it was nothing. The Final Four back then, Henry, was nothing compared to what it is now.
Wow.
I can't even tell you. I mean, the Final Four now is one of the biggest sports spectacles ever. But back then, Chito, you know that it wasn't all that big a deal. I mean, it was a big deal, of course, but it wasn't, it wasn't anything compared to how they do it now. But we, went to every one of those playoff games and saw you guys out there, and hey, they had heart. That team loved each other. They had heart. And by that, I mean they had courage. They would do what they had to win. And they just fought all the way to the Final Four. And even against UCLA, we gave them a great first half, didn't we, Chito?
Yes, ma'am.
Of course, UCLA at the time, I think every one of them, their players down to about the sixth or seventh man played pro. I think they were drafted. I mean, they had such unbelievable talent, but we hung with them. And I think if Sam Lacey hadn't been injured, that he could have done a little, it could have gone a little different maybe.
Chito capsulized that Final Four week under the guidance of the great Lou Henson.
Well, like Mrs. Henson said, when you're young and you think you're King Kong and Tarzan all in one, we're out there playing, but you're not quite aware of the impact you're having on the whole basketball world and Las Cruces and all that stuff, because we did it because it was all part of our program, and we just progressed. But every year, Henry, like Mrs. Henson was saying, our accomplishment getting to that level, you always stop and think, like, what business does Las Cruces, New Mexico have being up there with the elite? People say, well, that's what we should take pride in. Hey, well, how come New Mexico is here? Everybody, well, oh, New Mexico. But that's why everybody in the state, we were representing everybody. And every year as the Final Four comes along, you always hear people are calling you, oh, are you going to watch? You're going to watch this? And every year, the greater it becomes, Henry. Every year, whatever we accomplished back then, it just becomes a greater accomplishment. And we take pride in that, because not just anybody gets to say that. And to this day, to be part of the elite at that time, regardless of what era it was, to be the best, with one of the best. You know, you can't, nobody ever take that away from you, from the university, from the town, from the state, from everybody. And like I said, the greater it becomes every year as we go along.
Before we get off the show, I hope our producer, Jimmy Tran, finds a photograph of Lou Henson. And Mary, the legacy of your husband. It's probably a rhetorical question, Mary. What is his legacy?
Oh my goodness. That's a tough one, Henry, because it goes out there and involves so much. I think probably his legacy would be that he instilled confidence. He taught his players, athletes, his student athletes is what I wanted to say. His student athletes, as well as coaching them, he taught them what life was all about. I think he gave, and Chito can attest to this, but I think in each day, I think he tried to give them one of life's lessons, maybe. Something that he'd learned growing up the hard way. And I think he instilled in them confidence, because he taught them well, and they knew the game after he had coached them. And there's so many, most of them have gone out into the world and become successful men like Chito. I mean, it's just amazing when you go down the line and mention people, what they've become, what they've made of themselves, and so forth. And I think Lou has had, his legacy would have be in the fact that he helped them become good character, good men in life.
When you go back to Las Cruces, right now you're in Illinois. Every time you walk into that building, the Pan American Center, they applaud you. They yell your name. When they introduce you, you get a standing ovation. They love Mary Henson. What do you say to that community, Las Cruces, New Mexico?
Well, that's where we started. Our 4 children, we got married there. Our 4 children were all born there. They're native New Mexicans. We still have a home in Las Cruces, New Mexico. It's where our origins in married life began there. And we still consider it at one of our homes. I mean, it's amazing how you can interchange 2 places, but we feel like this is our home here in Illinois. But the minute we get to Las Cruces, that's our home. I mean, you know, we're very lucky in that regard. We always thought after we retired, we'd go back and forth and spend 6 months here and 6 months down there, and get to visit our friends in both places, our former players in both places, and so forth. And we've done that. But all I can have to say to the community is that we appreciate so much the love, the support, all through the years, what they have shown to our teams and to us personally. I mean, we really do consider it our home. Our roots are there, actually, from our 65 and a half years together. They began there. And we love that community. And as soon as as soon as I get my vaccine, I'm going to get on a plane and fly back.
Amen. I tell you, Las Cruces, there's no better climate anywhere in the world, in my opinion, better than Las Cruces. Do you concur?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, it's been fabulous. It's fabulous there. And it's better than LA anytime.
Chito, there's a chop.
Chito, I just had to say that.
Chito, in your opinion, what's Coach Lou Henson's legacy?
I think, well, for me, as a person, as a man, I've taken every little tidbit that he gave me, and I've tried to build on it and create strong moral character and become, because whatever he taught us, it just prepared you to be able to face some of the life's toughest challenges, Henry. And whether we face tough games in life now, everything that he was concerned about, he wanted you to be good men. He wanted you to build character. He wanted you to have confidence and go out there, because you're not going to find, if anybody, that went astray, that did bad things or whatever. We're not angels, but I mean, he paved the road for us to become, to be proud in our character and to be able to just stand up in front of people and with confidence and know what you've learned and the man that he wanted us to be. And I'll always remember that, because a lot of times I think about things, and when I read Coach Henson's book and that about his biography, when I read it, everything that I was reading, I was concurring with everything he was saying. And then I'm saying, well, why is that? Well, because he instilled that in us, not just me, but in all the ball players. And I think all the ball players will say the same thing. And for us, and now that I have, you say that everybody gives Mrs. Henson and Coach Henson a standing ovation. Well, I would give them a standing ovation for the rest of my life, both of them.
Oh, thank you, Chito. But I'd like to add something else. Do we have enough time, Henry?
Yes, we have 4 great minutes left.
Okay. I want to, Chito mentioned paving the way. You know, Lou had the way paved for him. And Coach Presley Askew, who coached him at New Mexico State, there wasn't a better person, a better high character and high moral person than Coach Presley Askew. He was Lou's mentor, and as well as his high school coach was very wonderful too. But Coach Askew coached Lou at Connors State in Oklahoma. Then he brought him to New Mexico State. And I'm telling you, that you talk about paving the way, Coach Askew did that in a big way for Lou. And Lou was always so appreciative of Coach Askew and all that he gave to him.
I want to take you back in time. This is the moment for Mary Henson, ladies and gentlemen. I used to tease Coach Henson about marrying the homecoming queen. I'm going to blindside you, Mary. Will you take us back to that day of coronation in your high school when they said, Mary, you are our homecoming queen? Take us back to that moment for a minute, if you don't mind.
Oh my gosh, if I can remember it, Henry. I'm an old lady. It's hard for me to remember all that stuff. Of course, it was football, a football game. And all I remember is that we had the coronation court and so forth. And I don't know if they announced it at the game or if it was announced but I was very, very humbled by it. I can tell you that. Because I mean, we had a little school. I had 35 in my graduating class. grew up on a farm, and we were from very humble beginnings. But you know what? Just that happening to me helped build confidence. It helped build confidence because I was a shy little farm girl. I can tell you that. Well, I ain't shy anymore. But anyway, it was a fun time in my life. I enjoyed my high school days.
I'm going to take you back to Chito Reyes, ladies and gentlemen, for a quick minute, and then we'll end it with one final question for Mary. Chito, describe your friend, Jimmy Collins, if you can, in 60 seconds, as he passed away in the last few days.
Yeah. Well, let me see if I can hold it together here. You know, there's times in life where you, throughout your life, you go in and you meet personalities, you meet friends, and you have situations where you meet people. Well, when I first went to New Mexico State, Jimmy was one of the first persons that I met. Him and Sam Lacey, they were in their dorm room. And throughout the years, he became, I was the only Latino from back here from the West Coast, and they were all from the East Coast. And he took me under his wing, and he made me feel comfortable. And to this day, from day one, even to these last few days, we did an interview with you. But, you know, he would always call me, we would laugh, and he said, hey, it's my brother from another mother. He said, and he mentioned to me, he said, we'll always be brothers for life. And he meant that. And when people tell you something, and like I said, it's hard for me to keep it together, because it hurts, you know, to see a good man. What he did was way, way, way beyond what it was expected of him. He never showed it. He was a humble man, and he was just regular Jimmy to me, and my brother Jimmy. And it hurts, and I'm sure the other teammates share the same thing. But, you know, whatever he did, well-deserved, and all the accolades, all the Hall of Fames and all that stuff, he'll always be my brother Jimmy. Tremendous, tremendous man.
Thank you. Our final question.
Oh, excuse me. I wanted to add that, something to that. You know, Jimmy, just like Lou, he was beloved here in Illinois. People love Jimmy, and he here in Champaign, and then when he became head coach at UIC in Chicago, he brought the program up and went the NCAA for the first time in their history, and he's beloved both places, just like Lou. He you know, you can't help love the guy. And we are going to miss him. I can't even tell you. I know Chito knows. We're going to miss him greatly.
Amen. As we close in our last 30 seconds, Mary, it's unfair to ask you this question in 30 seconds. As we end our show today, if it's not too private, could you describe for all of us the love that you and Coach Henson had for each other?
Oh my. I'm like Chito, I might lose it because when I start thinking like that.
Lovely Mary Henson. And with that, I hope you enjoyed it. You requested it. The phone is filled with requests. Please run it again. Thank you to Alden down at ProView Network. Thank you to our producer, Jimmy Tran. Great people for putting this together again. And we'll talk to you on Wednesday, right before Christmas, but an early Christmas present to all of you Aggie fans, to all you fans throughout the world who love Lou Henson. God bless you. Have a great day. And by the way, you can watch the entire interview on our website. Don't forget that, okay? GameFaceLive.com. Have a great day. See you soon. Bye-bye. Don't forget that, okay? .com. Have a great day. See you soon. Bye-bye.